The President of the United States, otherwise known as POTUS, is again and again referred to as the quote-unquote most powerful person in the world. This is a person at the helm of the world's biggest economy and by far the world's most powerful military. Geopolitically, the United States continues to wield considerable power in the world, even if that power has been waning of late. Sure, the president must work with Congress in order to get legislation passed, but even so, it certainly seems that there is very little that the POTUS cannot do. But the POTUS is not as omnipotent as many of us might believe. In fact, there is quite a lot that the President of the United States cannot do. It makes sense thanks to what is known as the Madisonian model, whereby America's structure of government is based on the powers of government being separated into three distinct branches, namely the executive, legislative, and judicial. James Madison proposed this method of apportioning power in government so that the power and influence of each branch would be balanced by those of the others. Hence, the POTUS is not all-powerful after all. This ranges from the serious and constitutional to the mundane and downright ridiculous. Allow us to give you some insight into the things the U.S. President cannot do. Let's commence with the serious stuff first, shall we? Executive orders issued by American presidents are famous and even sacrosanct as law. They are anything but that. In fact, executive orders are quite easily curtailed and regularly done. This strong curtailment on presidential power is evident in the fact that executive orders issued by a president can be overruled by the Supreme Court. President Obama tried to place a temporary ban on the deportation of illegal immigrants living in the U.S. via an executive order, but this was eventually blocked by the Supreme Court, and the POTUS cannot break the law since they are subject to not lying under oath. If the president does break this law, the House has the right to vote for impeachment, and the Senate has the right to try the matter as if it were a case in a typical court. That's what was facing Richard Nixon when he was threatened with impeachment due to the Watergate scandal, which obliged him to resign from the office of POTUS in August 1974. The only U.S. president ever impeached by the House of Representatives was Andrew Johnson in 1868, although he was acquitted 3 months later. You may not realize it, but it's Congress that can declare war, not the president, although the POTUS does have to sign off on the declaration of war. It's a myth that the POTUS gets to appoint justices to the Supreme Court of the United States, niftily dubbed SCOTUS. The POTUS can make a recommendation for a justice to be appointed for SCOTUS, but it's Congress that appoints the justice to SCOTUS, not the POTUS. Also, the president cannot curtail Social Security payments without full agreement of Congress. And the POTUS certainly cannot stop Social Security payments altogether, even if he wanted to. In the same way, the President of the United States also has no power to overturn or abolish Medicaid. The same, by the way, is also true of student debt. A president could not wipe out all student debt overnight, even if they wanted to. If right-wing, they could also not reverse gay marriage or overturn abortion rights, whilst, if more left-wing, the POTUS would not be able to legalize marijuana. Let's continue with football, or rather, the briefcase the Secret Service carries with them wherever they travel with the president, nicknamed the football. Its exact contents are unknown, but it does provide a way for the president to contact the National Military Command Center in case of an emergency, as well as providing a menu of options in case of a nuclear war or attack. Also quite serious is the rule that the president cannot keep any gift worth more than $375. If valued more, the president has to turn over the gift to the National Archives. Anything with lesser value is acceptable to keep and is considered a souvenir or mark of courtesy. It's clearly done with an eye to corruption or overt influence by foreign entities. Then there is the mundane stuff that the good old POTUS cannot actually do. For one thing, the president is not allowed to drive their own vehicle, at least not on public roads. Lyndon B. Johnson was the last president to ever drive on a public highway. They can do so on private property, so George W. Bush drove his pickup truck all around his Crawford, Texas ranch, and Ronald Reagan was known to drive his Jeeps on his ranch near Santa Barbara in California. For another, the president cannot eat outside the White House without a taster. Yep, it's a little known fact that the president has his own person to taste for the safety of the food. It sounds almost medieval, right? There was a hilarious time in 2013 at a lunch meeting on Capitol Hill hosted by Senate Republicans in which Barack Obama couldn't partake because there was no taster with him. Maine Senator Susan Collins commented about how Obama looked longingly at the food he could not eat. Interestingly, a sitting president cannot copyright any work that they write or produce. Federal copyright law states that any work created by a federal government employee in that person's official capacity remains in the public domain, and that includes the president. In the same vein of publishing their own opinions, a very modern issue that is arising is that of whether a president can delete their own online statements. Donald Trump is notorious for his tweeting, and has also acquired the habit of deleting tweets along the way. According to David Ferrero, archivist of the United States, the deleting of tweets may be a violation of the Presidential Records Act, as well as the Federal Records Act. Ferrero does admit that the legality issue in this regard is murky, since records management authority is ultimately vested in the POTUS anyway. Still, it's an interesting legal issue for the modern era, which the likes of Abraham Lincoln or John F. Kennedy would never have had to worry about. And from the sublime and even the mundane, we turn to the downright silly and even ridiculous. Did you know that the POTUS cannot own or use an iPhone whilst in office? This was revealed when Obama appeared on Jimmy Kimmel's Late Show in 2015, spoke about how he owned a BlackBerry since the president is not allowed any phones with a recording device. More bizarre is that the president cannot open his own windows, well, at least not in the White House, or Camp David, or any other residence or place in which he might not be currently staying or visiting. It's clearly for security reasons, but it's fun to know that the POTUS cannot do such a simple task we all take for granted. For more top lists just like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to check out our other lists. And thanks for watching, and thanks for learning.